very much.
Imagine creating beautiful boxes just like these. Well, you can, and it's much easier than you think. Gifkins Dovetail manufactures the easiest jig on the market.
Actually, what I might do is take off my...
It's the only Australian-made...
No, I can't do that because then it'll feedback.
It's so simple to use and cuts precise joints every time. There's no measuring, no fiddling, and no fuss. We even offer box-making courses to suit all levels. And of course, every purchase comes with our after.
Yeah, he says it's very faint. It sounds very faint.
Good.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Col here. It's a lovely day here in Coffs, and we're going to have a very simple little program today. I'm going to make a frame and panel lid. The frame and panel lid that I'm going to do is going to be the simple one. So as you can see by this lid here, there's no butterflies in it, there's no extra bits and pieces around the lid at all. It's just a very simple frame and panel lid. Of course it's got the little keeper on the top, but that's the sort of lid we're going to make today. I've got some really pretty timber, and one of the boxes that we've been working on is going to be the guinea pig for the box, for the lid. So we'll go from there. Now, this is how we start. The first thing you need to do is get yourself some timber sorted. If I take that off the desk and I'll go and find some timber. Now this is the lovely box that we made, it must have been about 3 or 4 weeks ago. One of the boxes that we made, where we cut everything, rolled over the edges, did all the good stuff to it, and came up with this nice frame box. So a simple frame and panel lid. We like to start at the beginning so that people get the idea of how to do things, and then we can sort of elaborate and sort of do little bits and pieces at a time to sort of build the fancy parts of the box that make it bling, you know. So lots of people say, oh yeah, how do you do the butterflies? How do you do this? How do you do that? Let's walk before we start running. Okay, so we'll go with that. And so what I have here is I have my timber. I've cut myself a frame, the frame parts, 2 long ones of course and 2 short ones. Now they match up to something that happens in the box. Of course this one here's got silver ash in the front of it and back of it. So I'm going to make the frame of the lid in silver ash. My little keeper, this little thing here, I made that out of a piece of jacaranda. So it's really similar colour to the silver ash. I may use it, I may not. We'll think about that when time comes. But first of all, let's have a look at the timber. Now, the width of the timber is dependent on your design. So whatever you want, whatever width you like, if you want a really wide piece or a narrow piece, play it by ear. Practice, do different things, and you'll end up with some really nice results. What we're going to focus on mostly here is technique on how to actually build the lid itself. So I have 30mm piece of timber, and now the timber itself is the same thickness as our depth of cut on our box, or the depth of that little shoulder. So it's the same height or just a little bit lower, but that's fine, and that's about 10mm anyway. Okay, so that's all we need to do. So what I want to do now is just show you how I set it up. Now this is the way I do it for lots of different reasons. When I measure my material, I'll measure across from point to point on the inside of the box to get my measurements. So I'll go from inside of the box to inside of the box. measure that there, and then I'll add 4 millimeters. What that gives me is 2 millimeter overlap on both ends. Now that 2 millimeters around the outside, it gives me lots of little room to play. If I damage during the process of building it, I've got something to trim off. And if it's a little bit out of square, it gives me the opportunity to square it up. So it gives you something to work with. If you do it exactly the right size and you make an error, you have to basically start again because it's going to be too small for your box. So a little bit bigger, and I just go 2 millimeters either way. So 2 millimeters in my length, and my short piece will of course go across, and you can see I've got 2 millimeters at each end. Okay, so just a small piece on each end. Now what I need to do is I need to cut myself some miters. So to allow for that 2 millimeters, I'm going to cut the miters in 2 millimeters from the inside edge. Get myself a pencil. I'll do that on the drop saw at this stage. So if I just measure in 2 millimeters, and as you can see, I'll just come in that 2 millimeters. Okay, I'll get my trusty square. This is my Col square. And I'm going to cut the miter on the end. I'm only going to mark one because when I go to my saw, I'm going to set the saw up so I can cut them all one after the other. So we'll go and do that. Incidentally, the panel that I'm using is a piece of red Banksia, and you can see that in the red Banksia you've got all these very dark medullary rays. When you put a finish on that, it matches up to the rose mahogany that's used on the outside edge of the panel. So I'm sort of linking my panel, even though it's a feature, I'm linking my panel to something that's happening around the box. So have a little think about that when you work with your piece of panel, or you make up your panel. You can go completely different if you like. It's a really good time to experiment with some really fancy timbers. So have a look around for pieces of timber. As you can see, they're not very big. Okay, it's not a large piece of timber. It's the same thickness as my framework, but as you can see, it's quite big. It's big enough to cover the whole of the box. So think about that when you've got a bit of time to sort of spend in a timber yard, and you see a fancy little piece of timber, you think, oh well, might be able to make a framework out of that. So I'm going to move over to the table saw now, to the drop saw, and I'm going to cut my miters, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm just going to shift ET for you, give him a little bit of a look. Let me see what we've got. Oh, look at that, that's pretty good. Can you all see that? Should be right. Now, shifting things all over the place today. As I said, this is going to be a simple job. Now, what I have here, I'll just come back to this camera for a second. What I have here is a setup for my drop saw. So this is a 45-degree angle. This goes up against my backboard, and I can just pop my piece of timber on there and cut it as I need it. Okay, so let's go back to what ET's looking at, and I'll set that up like so. So as you can see, I've got a tiny little bit of offset there. I'm just going to clamp that on. May not be right yet, but I'll have to see. if I set that like so, it's pretty much perfect. So this little step that I have here on the end, all I need to do now is just push my piece of timber up to that step, and once it touches I can stop. Now I'll cut that off across the mark that I've put on there, and then I'll just turn that over, push it up to there and cut that off, and they should be both the same. Okay, so let's do the first cut. Ears on, everybody. And so I've cut my first one, you can see that, and you can also see I have a 2mm step on the end of the piece of timber, right? So if I turn that over, push that up, so now I have exactly the same on the other end. So there's short piece, this piece here, mark that. Flip that over. There's my two pieces, and if you put those together and you check, you'll probably find that that will be a perfect 45, a perfect 90 degree inside there. Okay, bring OT back to where we were before. Oh, I could have got giddy with that one, spinning around. Okay, so now we have pretty much perfectly mitered frame. If you're doing picture frames, this is a simple way of doing picture frames as well. Just a bit of extra work involved in setting the rebates for the picture frame, but same sort of thing. So now we have this lovely little frame. Give you a bit more of a view there. There you go. Now if I put that on my piece of piece of panel, what I can do is I can actually have a look and see what it's going to look like, and I can move my timber and move the frame around the piece of paneling to see which is the best piece that I can use out of it. Okay, so I can have a little play with that and just work out exactly which piece. Now with this piece of red banks here, it's pretty much even all the way through. I don't particularly like the white bit on the outside edge, so I'm going to sort of move across to the edge a little bit and see if I can remove most of that. If you like it, of course, add it in so it gives a bit of feature to your box. You do it whichever way you like. Okay, so again, experiment, play with it. Have a little go at different types of timbers, and you'll get the idea. Okay, now next step is on this lid. On this lid, you'll see that the trench is really square. Okay, so it's really square. The rebate was a square cut shoulder. I prefer to roll the frame in to that rebate. So to do that, what I'm going to do is round over one edge of my frame before I cut the rebate in there for the panel to fit in. Okay, or the trench in there, I should say, before.
Col, can I just interrupt you for a moment while you mentioned the red Banksia?
Yes.
David, one of our viewers, bought some, and he said he'd never heard of it before.
Red Banksia.
Yeah.
Australian native.
Yeah. Is it common enough though?
No, it's not common.
That's the thing.
It's not a common timber. It's something that my supplier actually gave me to give it a bit of a try to see what it looked like, and this is a perfect opportunity. So again, it's not a. That's why I say to you earlier, if you're wandering around your supplier of timber and you find something that looks a little bit out of place, a little bit odd, has some nice features about it, has some nice colours about it, grab a hold of it. It probably costs you very little because it's something that the supplier would say, oh, there's not much use for that, so they'll throw it into a heap. But if you're really clever and pick them up, you'll find that you can use them in parts of your box as little features inside the box or on the lids.
So has it got the qualities that a eucalypt normally has?
It's not a eucalypt, it's a Banksia. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it has reasonably good qualities at this stage. This one's been sitting around here at home for 2 weeks now. It hasn't moved, split, cracked, or hasn't done anything obvious that you would see with a piece of timber. It's perfectly quarter sawn. If you have a look at it, you can see that it's perfectly quarter sawn. So it's a beautiful piece of timber. But yeah, like I say, if you see something like that, grab it. Okay, next step. Rounding over bit. I'm just going to round over one edge of these. I'll show you what I do when I do that. So a little bit of a scrub here just to check to see that everything is nice and clean. This is very important that you do this with all your router bits. A little bit of oil in the bearing. Hasn't been used today, so you might get a little bit of maintenance, and that's your maintenance, so it doesn't take very long. Very important. Drop that in. Need my spanner. Just tighten that up. Now before I start, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a look at the colour of the frame and see what I want up. You can see on these pieces of timber you've got these lovely grain lines on it. They are often highlighted when you put a finish on. Do you want them at the top? Do you want them in the box? It's up to you. So normally what I do is I'll have a look at them, and they're all pretty much the same like that. So I'm going to put a little arrow here, and that's telling me that's my inside edge. Okay, so that's all I need to have on there. And they're the edges I'm going to cut. So let's get down close and nice and close. And I set up. Like so. And I'm just going to roll the edge, so I just don't want that corner to actually catch on any part. Let's shift the box off the table before I do some damage to it. I need to get some earmuffs, folks, just to hang on a sec. Okay, ears on. Okay, now the secret to this is when you push your piece of timber onto the router bit, you need to make sure, you need to make sure that you move the corner of your mitre to the centre of the router bit. So it goes straight to the centre. You then roll along until this corner meets the centre, and then you pull it out that way. If you push it through, you're going to round into your mitre. And when you put the two together, you're going to have this little gap at the corner edge. So, good idea just to practice that. If you have to do a little practice cut beforehand, by all means do. I've done it a few times, so that was my practice. So ears on again. And so now when you look at it, you can see back here where you can see what's going on. What about I turn that around like so?
Like a jigsaw puzzle.
It is. So now you can see nice clean curve that meets. This one will meet the same, and then that one will meet the same again. Okay, so it's nice and rounded into the frame. Okay, so quite a nice little one, nice little idea. It just adds that little extra feature, considering it's going to be a simple frame rather than something that's a little bit more elaborate. So now what I need to do is I need to put a trench in there so that I can put my frame into it. So the round bit that I'm going to do with that, use that for that is a slot cutter. Now, as you can see, it's a big router bit. It's not going to fit in the hole. So we need to make sure that we have a very safe operational setup for this router bit. So let's take this one out and I'll show you how that works. I'm always thinking about safety. Router skills are a good skill to have, but you've always got to make sure that whatever you do, you're not going to cause yourself any grief or any injuries. So now what I want to do is I'm going to cut a rebate on a trench, I should say, along this edge here. So when you're building your fences, this fence is the fence that I use for this router bit. You can see I've got a slot in there. Okay, when you look at this side here, I've got a 1/2 inch groove that goes all the way almost across the piece of timber. That's for the shank of the router bit, and the slot will fit down through there. I'm rounded over a little bit because we have a grub screw sticking up on the top of the router bit, and you want it to clear through the top here. Okay, so it's quite an easy fence to make. All you need to do is have a 1/2 inch router bit, which is the same size as your shank. Clamp your piece of timber on there and then just push that through your router bit until such time as you have that straight trench all the way through there. You then change the 1/2 inch router bit and set this at the height you want and push it through again until it pokes itself out the other side. And that will give you a very safe cover. The only bit that's visible will be this bit on the outside that you're going to use for cutting. Okay, the rest of it's covered up and quite safe. So what I want to do is, first of all, find my centre. So an easy way of finding the centre is just guess where it is, flip your piece of timber around, and you can see I got it pretty close to the centre just by doing that. So I've used my finger gauge, just like so, and it's given me a centre. Now when I set this, the height for this, how am I going to see this so you can see what I'm doing? Let's get this over here. So what I'm doing there is I'm just setting by eye my height so that I'm pretty much in the centre of the cutting edge of that tooth. So you can see it's pretty much in the centre. Right. So now all I need to do is clamp my fence on.
Not in Gippsland.
Bring E.T. back again. Bring him right round this time. So if you have a look, okay, I have it set a little bit lower than this fence. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the router bit on and I'm going to slide it over until it stops. Okay, so this is the technique for cutting the trench in the side. I have one there at the moment, but it's not exactly in the right place, so we'll just adjust it a little bit just by doing this. So ears on, everybody. Notice fingers well away from the router bit. Okay, now when I've got it to there, what I can do is adjust my measurement, and I want a 10mm step in there, rebate in there, like so. That's my 10mm. Get one of my trusty Bessie clamps. I used to use G-cramps, and I was always of the opinion that G-cramps were the best for use, but I found that these Bessie clamps, this one here is the Duo clamp, is quite a good clamp for quite a lot of things. Now this is a rather big one. I've got some smaller ones on order, but they're very, very good for all sorts of things. I've just worked out that actually works really nicely there. Now, I'm going to cut my rebates with that. So let's go back to this camera. Just go back to this. I'm going to drop the camera away a little bit so that I don't hit it when I... You can see what's happening there. Now, need a push block. Need a pair of earmuffs, and I'm working from, I don't know if you can see me actually, I'm working from the side of the bench. So the beauty about our benches is you can work all the way around it. So I'm going to work from the side of the bench, and you'll see what's happening here. And of course you can see my ugly mug. So when we cut these, I'll just show you before I start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the pieces and I'm going to push that up to the fence, and then I have this lovely little push block. Okay, it's only a small one, and I'm just going to push that straight across the top of that. All right. So ears on, everybody. Now, what I've done there is I've cut myself this really nice little trench. What I want is I want the trench to be in the middle. So, because I did this by eye, I'm not sure whether it will be in the middle or it's at the top or the bottom. So the best way to get it in the middle, you can see I cut it this way, turn it over so you're upside down, and do exactly the same thing and just run it through. Ears on. Now you'll see that the distance from here to here and from there to there into the middle, my groove is perfectly in the middle. Okay, so that will give you some idea how to do the trench. You can see the trench, it's a really nice little trench. All I need to do is the rest of the pieces. So ears on, everybody, and I'll just do the rest. Lovely. Now I have the trenches, and all I want a bit of sawdust in there. Quite nice little setup. I've got all 4 pieces with these beautiful little trenches in there. You'll notice that the trenches themselves are really, really neat. This is a nice little router bit, this one here, but as I was saying to you earlier, safety is paramount with this router bit. You can see that all that's left out is that little 10mm piece, which would be the same as most of the router bits that you use, where you've got this tiny little bit exposed by your fencing. So that's quite safe as long as you go through the right sort of process to get it sorted. So now I have my little trenches, and it doesn't matter how big they are or how wide they are. I've got 10mm depth. If you put a ruler in there, you can probably check to see that it's right on 10mm. So it's a tiny little bit over, but that's okay. Okay, so that's all we need to do. Now, when you fit them all together, what I want to do now is work out which panel. Let me put this up a little higher. Okay, so what I want to do now is work out which bits go with what. And what I'm looking for here, they'll all be the same. They've got their rollover in the inside. They've got the trench around the outside, around the inside. What I want to do is I want to look at my grain and see how my grain meets up in all of the corners. And if you cut from the same piece of timber, you can generally get, and if you look at this one here, you can see that the colour of the framework, you can see the grain sort of meets up around the corners. This one here, not so much, so let's have a little play with this and see what we've got. It's pretty good here. And that looks pretty nice like that. Okay, so that's the way I want the frame to fit together, and we're looking for a uniformity of the colour so that we get grain travelling around the frame. It just adds that little extra to your box. Okay, so what I'll do here, I'm going to put a little couple of marks there. I'll put one there. I'll put 3 there, and of course I don't need to put any on that one. Okay, so all I've done is marked it. That's how it's going to go together when I put it in the frame to glue it together. Okay, right, now what I need to do is make a panel. So when I measure for my panel, take your ruler, sit it in the bottom of the trench, and right at the end here, if I move that right to the end, and then on the other end, I can see it's 210 millimetres from the bottom edge of that trench to here. What I want is to allow a little bit of room for movement of the timber. We want the timber to be able to move around when humidity changes and so forth. So I've got to leave a little gap in there anyway. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to back that off by a millimetre. So it's going to be 209 millimetres is going to be the length of my panel. So write that on there, 209. And the width of the panel, exactly the same thing. Put your ruler in, right to the end. It's 130. Okay, so 120. Can you see that? 120. There you go. 120. It's going to be 129. Okay, so my panel size is 209 by 129 mil. Okay. Get my panel. Here's my panel. Now I've got on the panel there's a bit of damage here. Okay, so I'm going to take that off. So the first thing I'll do is I'll excuse me, I'm going to cut that step off. Just give me a sec. I just had to clear the frog. Check the panel hasn't got any splits on the end. Looks pretty good there. Looks pretty good there. There's no marks on it. That would, I may want to get rid of this mark here. Okay, so that probably looks a little bit out of space. So I'll use this end of the panel. I'll just check to see that there is nothing that's going to interfere with anything. Okay, so my length was 209, I think. Okay, so that's going to be my length, and I'll trim up this edge first and then we'll take it from there. So let's go back to the saw. So come along, ET. I can remove my frame. Not bad having a very small workshop. I don't have to walk a long way. I suppose I need the exercise every now and then, but anyway.
Just check your vision, Col.
All right, okay. ET's not doing the right. Let's get in here.
Operator error.
Operator error. How's that looking? Pretty good. So I'm just going to trim that edge off first. So that's not too bad. And it was a 129. I've got a square edge there, so I'm going to remeasure that on the other side. 209, sorry, 209. Save that little piece, and it was 129 wide. And luckily that's taken away a lot of that lighter stuff, the sapwood, that I don't particularly like. So here is my panel. Now, Dave Stanton's going to make the lid for his box today on his show. He's going to be using a similar technique to cut a rebate in the side. So we're using a panel raising bit, and he's going to cut rebates around here so he can fit it into the trenches that he cut last week on the frame before he glued it up. So have a look at this, and then have a look at Dave's. I think he's doing the rebates next week. I'm not quite sure. I think this week what he's doing is cutting the lid to size, and then marking some slots with his CNC, and then adding some hue and pine inlays. So they should look really pretty, but yeah, have a look, see how you go, and then he's going to do the lid. Okay, so there's my fence, get rid of that. And what I need now is my panel raising bit. Now, panel raising bit hasn't got a bearing on it, but I did give it a scrub before I started, before I set it up, so no need to go there again. The panel raising bit, if I haven't said to you before, is one that's designed by Gifkins. It's not a standard router bit. What's happened is, what we've done with it is it's been redesigned so that the cutting tooth is set at 8 degrees. Normally they're about 1 and 1.5, which creates a fair bit of tearing when you're cutting across the grain. If you've got it over a little bit, it gives more a shearing cut, and that way it minimises some of the sanding that you might have to sort of deal with later down the track. So it gives a much cleaner cut when it's shearing. Okay, now this might take a couple of cuts, but as you can see, my panel raising bit, all I'm going to do is slide that over the top, and that cut out there matches that router bit. Okay, drop this down. Now when you look at, when you measure from the bottom of the piece of timber to the bottom of the trench, you can see I have 3 millimetres. It'll be the same on the other side, it'll be 3 millimetres. So I'm going to set my height at 3 millimetres. You can't see this, but I can. Now, if you're not sure, set it a little lower so that you're actually not cutting enough off, and you can always creep up to the right size. So what we're doing here, I'm going to slide that over, and my measurement to the outside edge, my trench is 10 millimetres. I want a millimetre gap. So if I set that at 9 mil, clamp that down. Make sure that's tight. And the offcut, this offcut is what I'm going to test on. Okay, so I'm just going to run that through here and give it a test. So ears on, everybody. Not working. There, we got it. And so what I have now is I have the rebate, and you can see that tester, and if I put it into there, as you can see, it doesn't fit. Right? So all I need to do is creep up on the size. So it actually shifted when I'll just shift this out of the way again. This is a little awkward today. All I'm going to do now is raise the router bit a tiny little bit. A little bit more. Okay, ears on, and we'll have another go. Still not quite there. Come up a little bit more. Okay, so now what I have, it fits perfectly. Okay, so that fits in there perfectly. What I need to do now is give myself the correct distance. I set that at 9 millimeters, so that gives me enough material to work out the thickness of my rebate. What I want to do now is I want to allow for the curve of the rebate so that it doesn't bind on the top edge and the bottom edge of the trench. So 9 millimeters is the depth that I need in here, and to give myself plenty of room to avoid that binding, you can see it catches very close. The distance from the outside edge of, the inside edge of the frame piece to the edge of the rebate should be about 3 millimetres. So if I've got 9 millimetres and I need another 3 millimetres, I should go out to 12 mil. So if I reset that, tooth around so I can get at it. Are we keeping up, folks? How are we doing with it? Okay, so there we have 12 mil. Let's go a little bit more. Have a recut. Ears on, everybody. As you can see, that is just beautiful. Look at that. How lovely is that? It fits, and there is a tiny little gap at the back edge which will allow freedom for the piece of material to expand and contract depending on the weather. Okay, now you'll also see it's perfectly flat on the back as well. Okay, on the top, really, really nice. How good is that? All right, now for the real McCoy. When I cut my rebates, I always cut across the grain first. Now some people don't, some people like to do it differently, but I always cut across the grain first. If I get any tear out on the edges, I can clean it up when I go along the edge. All right, because you generally won't get too much tear out along the grain. You'll get it when you go across the grain because there's no support at the end of the piece of timber. So now we cut. Shift all the stuff out of the way. Ears on, everybody. Okay, let's see what we have. Now, they don't always fit first go. I need to adjust them occasionally. But let's see what we have. That one goes on there. Number 2 we want, this one. Looking good so far. Wow, look at that. Spot on first go. So there's my frame and panel lid. Oh, it came apart. Got a nice even gap all the way around here. And you can see all my joints are nice and square and they fit together. So the next thing to do is to glue it up and put it in a frame. Now, you may need, just get rid of some of this stuff, you may need to make yourself some sort of clamping board so that you can clamp your timber into place and when you're gluing it. So I have a clamping board. Let's drop this out of the way. That's what this thing is. If you can see that. Let's go to the top one. What I have is a frame. Look at all these bits and pieces in here. It's basically a frame, and you can see in here I have a whole heap of T-nuts. So they're all lined up there. So my frame, I can use that to make lots of different size panelled lids. And what I do, and this allows me to squeeze them up, I basically sit that on a piece of greaseproof paper so that it doesn't stick to my frame when I glue it. And these are all spaces, so I just add them in there, and you change that according to how big your panel lid is. You can make a larger lid and fit it in there and just make smaller pieces together, but you only need to push two sides, so it's just a matter of pushing it in like so.
We should mention that there is a plan for this on free downloads on the website.
I hope you heard that Pam was just saying that there's a free download for this plan on our website, on our Gifkins website. But so that's all you need to do to clamp that together. So that's now set in place. Okay, I was showing you this. So that's now set in place. So all I need to do now is put some glue in the corners, and we're not going to glue it today. It'll take too long because I've only got a couple of minutes left. I'll glue in the corners. So they're the only parts that get the glue, except for in the end of the trench here. So a very small amount of glue in here. Now people say to me, there's nothing, because you've got end grain to end grain, there's nothing to hold the panel together. It's under no pressure at most of the time. It's not under a great deal of pressure. So that little bit of glue that's in each of the ends there, and the amount of glue that you put on there, if you use a good quality glue, you will find that it will stay together for a very long time. But that's how we glue it together. Now, as I said before, there's a plan for that frame on our website. So if you go to our website, you can download the plan, but we also have these. These are the T-nuts that I have in here. Okay, I also have a set of those. So you can buy a pack of T-nuts, and there's 12 T-nuts in there and 4 handles, and build yourself a frame for your lid. All you need to do is go to our website and you can find those bits and pieces on there. So have a little look at that. We've run out of time. So what I'll do is I will glue this together. I'll fit it onto the box and I'll show it to you next week, because next week what I want to do is I want to have a look at building a supports for a tray in the bottom of the box, and then we will probably build a little tray if we have the time. So that's what's coming up next. So have a little play with this, have a little think about how you go about your frames. Like I said, little extra weight on the outside of it, and I'll show you how Actually, I think what I might do is next week I might show you how to fit that to the box. So that's going to get fitted to this box. I had plans of actually fitting this lid, which is the one that I made during the week. Same lid is going to go on this box. So I had plans of doing that. So I might do that next week, and that will probably give you a bit more of an insight on how the frame and panel lid works completely. Now, somebody asked me about butterflies. A couple of weeks time, or the next box will have the butterflies in it. So we'll show you how to do the butterflies as well. So watch next week. If you like what you've seen today, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and press the bell, and come back to us every week, and I can push you through some other little techniques and things like that. So I hope you got something out of this week. All I can say now is be safe, everybody. Have a good weekend and enjoy your box making, and I will see you next week.